systems, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I think where the thought I left off on was where I think is a major difference isn't just an approach of looking at things exclusively symptomatically, but I think separating the um the idea of spirit self and like or your soul self and
Okay.
your body. Um and I think that's why it's so easy to create healthcare systems that are dismissive of people's experiences, um, not just pain, but also the emotionality that comes with illness,
Hmm.
um, outside of how we broadly ascribe types of depression.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's at a point where it's beyond caught up with us, um, and we can't continue to operate in a healthcare system that does that, because no matter how much money we pour into it, it'll never be fully as efficient as it could be. It'll never be optimized. We've seen cultures who do far more with far less because it's more whole person or whole being centric.
Right.
So, mhm.
You talk about this spirit and the soul, and then did you mention like the mental health aspect? Is that something else? Like, so for people who, can you talk about how would you talk about that for people who maybe um, don't have like maybe think of mental health separately from like spirituality, or maybe like they don't have like a religious background. How would you talk about how that would affect them?
Sure. Well, I think the first key, and we do this here, in chaplaincy work, um, is ensuring that people understand that spirituality and religion are two very different things.
Hmm.
Um, but culturally, it's going to take a little bit longer, I think, for the broader public to get a full grasp of that. I think we're on our way,
Okay.
more as a body of people who see that. And I think from there, you'll have more people who feel more comfortable um, exploring and exercising aspects of their spiritual self enough to recognize when it's in discord.
Okay.
Um, and I believe it'll help with more help seeking behaviors, and all of those things normalize types of care that are traditionally or have been historically sort of poo pooed uh, in the past, and whether it's in certain groups like the Black Americans or just in general. So, our methods of practice in regard for mental health in this country, as far as a humane approach to it, is super new. You don't have to go that far beyond our birth years uh, to see how poorly people with different types of mental disorders were treated.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, keeping all things a buck in that regard, we've come a long way in a short period of time, and we have the capacity to grow further. But recognizing that initially is a great first step.
Okay. Yeah, so you kind of like feel like in our system, like it's hard to treat someone physically if we're not looking at their mind state, or we're not addressing any like mental health issues that they're going through.
The spirit. Let me see if I got your question right. Are you saying that it's not easy to treat a patient, or it's not the most optimal way to treat a patient in disregarding their mental health?
Well, see, that's actually interesting because I used the word mental health, but I didn't use the word spirit. But you seem to use those interchangeably. Is that correct?
No, I
No.
don't use them interchangeably.
Okay.
Um, I think they have an influence on each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I was wondering if you feel it's like not optimal if someone's being treated physically, but we don't know what their like mental health um, looks like or their mental health status is.
Yeah, I don't think that's optimal at all. There's more attempts to get an assessment. You'll see more charts that where you're establishing yourself as a new patient,
Hmm.
or there's an update of a records, a medical record system where they'll ask questions, and there's built-in screenings uh, to where if you answer a certain question in a certain way, it'll flag you and then they'll follow up.
Okay.
Um, all of it is very mechanized because it kind of has to be to fit like the machine of industrial healthcare in this
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
Um, but that's it's still better than nothing, and so
Right.
that's good. Um, because it normalizes someone being even asked in the first place, and
Right.
so that's really amazing. However, uh, the mechanization of it is still quite flawed, but
Okay.
that will take time. These are things that we brought in into a greater depth of the narrative practice of medicine among practitioners
Okay.
before it it can work. And you'll have some. I've been in the room, um, but these are seasoned doctors, so they know how to finesse it. The timing and the questions and having these intimate patient relationships. There'll be some who can finesse it and rock in there, and they'll know right away, and they'll come out. But they've been practicing medicine almost as long as I've been alive, so
Okay.
it's an unfair advantage. But we need to teach that coming out of med school.
So you're saying like when the questions are just like mechanized and they're just like some like rote repetition of some questions without like an emotional intelligence or like a human, um, you know, a human communication or a human touch, it doesn't have the same effect,
It
right?
doesn't, as much as they try. And right now, with the integration of an electronic medical record, that a more advanced AI based electronic medical record, they're going to need those sort of nuanced type responses to get more accurate data out of it, to get more accurate treatments.
Okay.
Perfect example. I tripped up the system. Um, by answering a few questions very honestly yet colloquially.
Okay.
This was at EMC, and my primary care team is in Manhattan, but I was in school at UB. This is during the pandemic,
Okay.
and it was asking me questions about my quality of work or something as a student. Now I'm in my mid 40s, and I'm in a PhD program in the middle of a pandemic, and yes, it's stressful as hell.
Right.
it everything honestly and colloquially, it sent off a big flag, and the doctor came back and looked at me, and we both laughed. She was African, and so she fully understood because she took the time to go back and read and then meet me, and then we had a mutual cultural understanding. So that's not always the case, and there's not always that type of time.
So
And
you mean
so
without
if you speak to
context?
anyone in the business,
Mhm. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
mm-hmm, no, but you said exactly what I was going to say. If
Right.
you speak to anyone in business who of helping develop the more advanced AI version of electronic medical records, to
Okay.
where we have more telehealth and it's advanced, they will tell you that they need people to help create a more cultural, broadly and specifically culturally resonant language. um, but at the end of the day, it's not a person. I could
Right.
tell you everything I know about every type of femaleness or blackness or mid 40ness, and it still won't be as comprehensive enough to capture, you know,
Right.
your experience. You know, you're my peer in some regard, but you're still not. You're a male, and we had somewhat similar upbringings, a somewhat similar college experience, but we're
Mhm.
very different.
Right, right. And you're saying right now with the AI that they're using to capture, they're not able to pick up on all of the essential differences.
No, it's. I think in some degrees that it will be possible, um, in the not so far future, but
Right,
I think there will still be, you know, a lot of oversight, a lot of mistakes,
right.
um,
And that sounds
and the,
like it sounds like there needs to be time to play catch up, whether it's like data being collected or what iteration of AI we're on, or that kind of thing.
right, right. And our history of institutional distrust, we don't participate in these types of studies compared to other racial or ethnic groups. And so getting us to even be a part of it enough to play that type of catch up is a it's a thing. It's a
Okay.
thing.
So so it puts those, it puts those processes at a disadvantage because we're not even participating. So whatever info they have on us, the sample size is either going to be too small or isn't going to be broad enough to capture our experience.
Right. We do need extra care in that. We need extra attention in that. Or how about we just have people? Like,
Right. Right.
you know,
Yeah. Good old
how about
fashioned
we just,
people.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess, I mean, I'm sure there could be some advantages to AI, but I always think that they can maybe be used in tandem and not in place of, but maybe to catch something that's missed. Maybe if you have people working a lot of hours with lots of patients, you maybe fill in a few gaps, use it to your advantage and not, to your disadvantage, or not to replace, for sure.
Abs- Absolutely. It's not the big bad monster. It's not the big bad monster, period. You
Right.
know, I think we have to keep all things in consideration of us being the end user and not the used in some
Yeah,
capacity,
for sure.
and not fear technology or fear the unknown when it comes to integrating these different types of care. Um, you know, I think that holistic across the board. I talked about it a little bit last week. Was it last week? In a post about bioengineering
Hmm.
and food. You know, and we have the capacity to use that tech to our advantage. And I've never heard anyone stateside talk about it.
Okay.
Um, it makes me think about your journey with your weight loss in swapping out nutrient dense foods and alternate preparations and things like that. And you did it
Mhm.
very successfully. And to have the ability to do that through the use of technology in food sourcing is a real thing.
Right.
And and I get it that the economics and of all parts of the economy of food sourcing is very different for black farmers compared to our non-black counterparts. I get that completely, especially for small operations. But in general, the tech behind it could be used in the same way that you've had to engineer a new lifestyle. We
Hmm.
could also engineer new foods.
Yeah. I think when people hear the word engineer foods, they think of like Frankenfoods and Monsanto and, I know like some of these issues are separate and maybe they're thrown in the same box, but like for instance, um, we have like one kind of banana that we basically eat in the United States, even though there's like probably dozens and dozens of types of bananas.
Right.
It's like it
Right.
kind of goes along with capitalism and the way that we've engineered and the way that we sell things. And I think people are afraid that they'll be opting into something that is quote unquote unnatural, or maybe sometimes doesn't have the nutrients, so then they have to put the nutrients back in, maybe with ascorbic acid and all these other things. So it gets lumped in as something that is not as healthy, not as natural, and maybe is benefiting big corporations like Monsanto rather than giving us the freedom of choice and things like that.
Yep. You're right. We do tend to lump things in based on terminology that's used. I always argue, and I got to know that more when I started teaching English as a second language to adults instead of children.
Okay.
Is not to sound elitist, but how lazy our language is,
Hmm.
um, in terms of how we exercise word choice, um, and but then we love giving it these broad terms, very finite meanings, and then taking offense on it. It's
Right.
like, hold up, like don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, you know.
Right.
Um, I heard a sister argue that one time about the term eugenics,
Okay.
and might. Um, it was a forum on reproductive rights and history held at the Schomburg, I believe, in 2021.
Okay.
And uh, I was one of those people who, when I would hear the term eugenics, I'd be like, you ready to battle,
Right.
and it broke it down into Black eugenics movements of the '60s, and I was like, wow, when we really take a moment and look at the broad context of what it does and what it is, instead of ascribing exclusive use to that language to a certain social dynamic.
Right.
um, I think we can reappropriate things in our mind first to sort of not disparage ourselves.
Sure. Sure. I guess it's kind of what is it? It's like the difference between a definition and what's the other word that's like what we kind of ascribe to a word that's a little bit different than the definition, but it becomes like the known use of the word.
Mm, I was gonna say ascription, but I mean that works. But you said ascribed.
Right.
uh, it'll come to me. It'll come to me.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Um,
you're on it. You're a wordsmith.
yeah, for sure. So, like, what do you feel about like the term GMO? What is your opinion on GMOs?
GMOs. In the broad definition of it, um, we've been consuming them our entire lives. Uh,
Okay.
uh, my favorite idea of that is the apple.
Okay.
Especially people like to get bent out of shape about things being seedless or not seedless or growing true to seed. There's no apple that's true to seed. Now, you were talking about varietals a minute ago as far as bananas.
Hmm.
I think, and I could be wrong, commercially, apples is the main produce item that's available commercially that offers the broad public the most varietals. You've lived
That
in New York.
sounds right. That sounds right.
Yeah, yeah, you lived in New York State long enough to know there's a jillion kind of apples, and every fall I'm finding a new one. I've lived in New York State my whole life. Um,
Mhm.
they've never grown true to seed. What we know as an apple, when we go to Wegmans or Tops or whatever, uh, is not a true apple. And they continue to crossbreed them, for preferable qualities. I
Mhm.
actually had a horrible apple earlier that I turned into dessert. but,
Was it
but
mushy?
What kind you say?
Oh, I said, was it mushy?
No, it was the perfect. Here's the crazy part. It's one of my favorite kind of apples. It was a gala apple,
Okay.
but it's all July. They're not in season, but
Oh,
I,
okay.
I grabbed the bag and I brought it home. I cut it open. It was horrible. It was crisp, uh, juicy. The flavor was just. Some of them are a little tart. It's just traditionally a sweet apple.
I
It
see.
was the other flavor, just wildly wrong.
Okay.
Um, yeah, very not consistent with the typology. But back to what saying about GMOs, they they breed them for that, and the crossbreeding of those, uh, the splicing and crossbreeding is pretty the simple mechanics of hatching branches and then cross pollination, and then you just kind of wait. Um,
So what you're saying is,
that's
according to definition, that is a GMO product.
technically, but when we think about it in terms of the thing that's the boogie monster under the bed, we're thinking about more advanced genetically modifying that's a closer product, a quicker, closer product, meaning you're in the lab, you're looking at specific properties on certain gene pairs,
Mhm.
um, and then in the lab for your first round, which doesn't really happen in nature, your first round to get a specific outcome.
Okay.
That that's the scary part. And by right, that's genetically modifying as well.
I
But
see.
I think
I see.
that's Frankenstein we're all kind of about,
Right.
and
The
rightfully so.
and
Um,
I know as
because
oh, go ahead. Whoops, you've been
okay,
cutting out. You've been cutting out a little bit.
yeah,
I am on my end.
sorry.
Okay. I've closed everything. Do you have anything open that might be slowing you down? Any other windows open?
I do have my email, and now it's closed.
Okay. Yeah, as a
And
vegan. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear what you said again.
oh, I'm outside, so I don't
Oh,
know
okay.
if.
Oh, maybe the signal's not as strong. Okay.
But
Um, yeah, it could be. I will say there's no wind or anything like that, so that's good. But maybe for next time we'll check the signal on the inside. Um, I was gonna say, as a vegan, I think one thing we always think about is like we hear certain fruits are using some kind of like fish gene or something to make them like immune to like cold or something. And I don't know what
yeah,
that actually means as far as consumption, but it does make people think, well, that's not what I wanted there. I wanted something that was all veggie.
right. Well, yeah, and rightfully so. And yes, those types of mechanisms do happen where you'll take a gene expression in something that's not of even the same. I mean, you're going from animal to plant. That's a
Yeah,
no no.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, gene expression from plant to plant is quite normal. We've been doing it forever.
Right.
But when you do introduce things outside of the scope of, from type of animal to animal, like we saw with zoonotic disease and the beautiful COVID-19 virus, or you
Right.
go just straight out of one to the other,
Yeah.
that gets clearly, again, we see with diseases.
Right.
I don't think anything great can come out of that. It does make me nervous, because not just for the fact of the properties of the progeny of that down the line, um, being unpredictable. I don't even see, and granted, this is not my field, but
Right.
what little that I do know, I believe has contributed to, um, great shifts in types of immunology.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's a part of this really, really hypersensitive um, histamine reaction we're seeing in children.
Okay.
Um, I think it contributes to proclivity to autoimmune disease and other illnesses.
Okay.
Um, I do. This is not an expert opinion. That is not my field.
Sure.
But based on in nature, that's a no-no.
Well, one thing that I think of when I think of GMOs, acknowledging the fact that it's a very broad term and we
Yeah.
tend to think of it in specific ways. I think of what Monsanto does with its seeds and like how it makes them, terminate in a certain way unnaturally so they can charge people more for the next season, and what that does to like crop rotation and soils and things like that, and how it's all being bent for a capitalist um, means to benefit this corporation, and to really hurt small mom and pop businesses and family farms in order to get to its means and things like that.
Oh yeah. I mean, health aside, which you would never say health aside, but health
Right.
aside, I just think it's beyond deplorable.
Yeah.
Um, it First of all, we're talking about a food supply, a food supply in a country that whose farming system for many years in our lifetime, since the beginning of our lifetime, hasn't been able to keep up with the rate of population growth. And
Hmm.
so to impede that alone in any way, let alone in a way that exploits small businesses, is just gross. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. For
it's
sure.
absolutely besides the fact where you take away the ability of these small farmers to have heirloom crops,
Right.
um, are unique to their farm, has been historically unique to their farm or their area. Um, it not just messes up the biodiversity of the soil. I think I think it compromises the end product too.
Hmm.
You and I both know, just in general, in our lifetime of consumption, and I think you're only a year. You're 47.
45, but I'll be 46 in September.
Okay, so we're exactly the same age.
Okay.
And in our lifetime, a tomato or specific type of apple has not tasted the same in a very long time. And or we can go down the line of most produce, basic what we would consider basic produce, and say that the product itself is not even good or as good as it used to.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like the difference. Have you ever eaten food like right out of a garden as compared to, you know, gone shopping?
Of course, of
Yeah.
course. Even that, and heirloom varieties aside, but even like a basic, you know, I I did not like tomatoes until I had a garden heirloom. I was an adult.
Right.
I would avoid them adamantly. I hated them growing up,
Yeah.
and up until very, very recently.
Yeah. 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 I think I remember having a tomato out of a garden, and instead of that like mushy way that the skin kind of peels off, and when you bite into it, it just had like a vibrant, like it was just like a whole other thing. It was like enjoyable, you know?
It is, and that's another reason why I think it's super important for people to have these farm to table or garden to table experiences so they can fall in love, you know, with vegetables. It kind of makes me, it's wild to me that there are adults, who don't like vegetables.
Right, right.
Like,
Well,
how?
well,
But, but.
well, one thing I've said, not to throw any family under the bus or whatever, but it's like I remember, getting some type of, whether it was succotash or something. I remember just like frozen mixed vegetables and how bland that tasted. And then on top of it, they were actually like boiled. And I'm like, boiling vegetables? Like, you
Mm,
might as well be guaranteeing your kids won't like vegetables. You know,
it's true.
it's like boil all the, like, well, first of all, you freeze the taste out of it because it's
Right.
frozen and it's not fresh. And now you're boiling whatever taste was left in there.
It's true. It's true. There's some comedian who talks about Brussels sprouts getting an upgrade, and listen. That's the truest statement I ever heard. I hated them growing up. I knew when they were cooking.
Mhm.
It was awful. Until I had roasted ones.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's like the same with cauliflower. If you have like oven roasted cauliflower, it's the bomb.
right.
Way different than that thing that was, that they boiled the life out of.
It's true. It didn't even look right. It
Yeah,
did. It didn't.
yeah.
But that preparation and the cultural differences in preparation also plays a huge part. Um, my first New Year's in Harlem, when it started integrating more,
Yeah.
and you couldn't find greens around New Year's,
Okay.
and I started seeing people saute them. I got angry. What are you doing?
Okay.
Why are your greens crunchy? Like
Okay. Okay.
like collards, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, but,
Have you ever grown to like sautéed collard greens, or is that still a no?
I can look every other green
Hmm.
in the garden. Yes, you're welcome to saute that for me,
Right.
but never ever ever a collard green.
Got you. Got you.
No,
Got you.
I, and it's crazy because I eat easily a quarter pound of raw kale a day.
Okay.
Kale,
Wow. Well, yeah, kale is tough.
it is. It's tougher than collards, but
Yeah.
collards gotta be it's cultural,
Got you. Got you. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of where your earlier question. I think that's where we are. I think that's the way out to get at least a good fix on the spiritual self.
Yeah.
We'll get going.
Hmm.
Can't keep cutting people into pieces.
Right. For sure.
Hmm.
All right, great. Well, I think that's a great place to end it. Enjoyed the conversation this week, and then we'll see what happens next week. We'll see if Dee will rejoin. But yeah, thanks for all of your knowledge, and thanks for sharing and bringing a cool, unique perspective.
Thank you. Always thanks for having me.
Yep.
And enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay. Enjoy the rest of yours too. See you.
Bye.
Bye.